What's the weather like in this world?
What's the weather like?
What's the weather like in New York?
What's the weather like?
What's the weather like in Puerto Rico during winter?
What's the weather like?
What's the weather like?
What's the weather like where you are?
What's the weather like when they came in today?
What's the weather like up there?
What's the weather like? Is it going to be frizzy?
What's the weather like in Glasgow?
What's the weather like otherwise?
Standard. What's the weather like up there?
What's the weather like today?
What's the weather like next week?
Hi, Yufeng. Sunday, it'll be 66 degrees and partly cloudy. Monday, it'll be 63 degrees and cloudy. Tuesday, it'll be 66 degrees and partly cloudy. Wednesday, it'll be 68 degrees and cloudy.
Oh boy.
Thursday.
Okay, yeah, that's...
What's the weather like there?
What's the weather right now? Okay.
I'm visiting London in blah 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 month. What's the weather gonna be like?
In other words, what's the weather gonna be like in the 21st century?
Hey, Jagexa, what's the weather looking like today?
I don't know, Stephen.
What's the weather right now?
What's the weather been like?
Hot.
Hey Google, what's the weather going to be like today?
Today in Mountain View it will be a high of 101 degrees.
Wow, that's really hot.
Robert, what's the weather going to be like today?
What's the weather in San Francisco?
What's the weather going to be tomorrow? Or
What's the weather going to be like tomorrow?
What's the weather like at this time of year? What's the weather like on the weekend? Any good?
Okay, Google, what's the weather like in Indianapolis?
What's the weather like in your city today? You might say, I don't know. Or maybe you say, oh, it's a cold one today. It's a rainy one, unfortunately. I have to wear a rain jacket and an umbrella.
What's the weather like there? What's the climate?
What's the weather like in Las Vegas?
Alexa, what's the weather like today?
Right now in Marietta, it's 70 degrees Fahrenheit with clear skies and sun.
Alexa, what's the weather like? And she tells us.
what's the weather like in Seattle?
It is raining, Michael.
What's the weather like? Is it cold, snowy, and forbidding on the mountain?
What's the weather like?
What's the weather today?
It's raining. No, it's sunny.
It's sunny and I have everything packed up. Let's go.
Some days it's sunny blue skies, but a lot of days it's cloudy.
And that it's sunny twice as often as it's rainy in Rhode Island.
If it's sunny,
It's sunny today.
It's sunny. Outside it's sunny.
It's rainy season in northern Thailand, and when it rains, it really does pour.
It's rainy or windy or snowy or 75 degrees and partly cloudy.
It's raining.
And if it's rainy, tomorrow it might be sunny.
It's snowy and cold.
Sometimes it's
below
snowing.
0 and it's snowing, and I mean that's, yeah.
It's cold, it's snowy, it's gross outside.
It's cold, it's snowy.
Snowy outside.
It's cold and snowy outside. It's a big snowy day, first day of class.
And it's in the southern part, so it's not as much in the snowy areas, but it's not in the desert either.
It's windy, so you can't even use helicopters.
It's cold, it's windy, it's rough waters.
It's windy if it's not windy.
It's windy. It's windy and too rough out there.
It's on a deck of a ship where it's windy and wet. It's windy or it's too hot.
It's windy. Look at Dev's hair. We didn't have to buy a wind machine.
It's windy out.
Hot. It's quite windy. It's not really hot. But because it's windy, all of the pollen is blowing around and going up my nose.
It's raining and it's windy and it's cold and there are frozen puddles around.
If it's hailing,
It's not raining or hailing.
It's hailing outside.
It's cloudy outside. When it's cloudy like today. It's cloudy last night.
It's cloudy.
it's cloudy.
When it's cloudy.
It's cloudy. It's warm and dry.
It's warm enough. Let's go into the park.
It's warm today. Next week it's going to be really cold here.
It's warm in the subarctic. Extremely warm.
When it's warm and nice outside.
It's warm.
It's warm, it's wet, it's probably covered in friendly puffy clouds, and it's warm every day.
It's warm in here.
It's warm. It's dark. It's moist.
And it's warm.
The weather's good.
And the weather is perfect for launching rockets.
The weather is really bad.
The weather is actually quite severe compared to California.
Gosh, whether your weather's like this that Tim and I are enjoying.
The weather's not perfect.
The weather is like this.
The weather is simply a problem.
The weather is, we're told, 75 degrees below 0, and which means about 107 degrees of frost.
The weather is warm.
Weather's bad. Weather's calm.
The weather is good.
The weather is nice during the academic year.
The weather is very changeable in the spring.
The weather is pretty good.
The weather is like, bad and that kind of thing.
The weather is warmer, the days are longer.
The weather is changing.
The weather is way nicer than where you're living.
The weather is sunny so far.
The weather is nice I love LA. LA is great. The weather is amazing.
Weather is clear.
In Iceland, the weather is found to be highly variable.
Danny, the weather is always clear, so that's a good thing.
The weather is usually rational.
The weather is not very good to go out at sea on boats.
The weather's great.
Well, the weather's looking a bit iffy, so I'm going to get the tent up before it rains.
The weather is getting hotter.
The weather is crystal clear, blue skies just like this.
The weather's so bad there.
The weather is getting weirder and weirder.
The weather is being kind.
The weather is bad. They are not so happy.
The weather is mild.
The weather is still cold,